Every life has a story. Some are told, others wait to be revealed. Stay with us. This is Daily Dose.
You know, there are moments in public life where the mask doesn't just slip. It shatters. It falls to the ground in front of millions of people, and no amount of PR strategy, no carefully worded statement, no sympathetic interview can ever put it back together again. What happened to Meghan Markle in February of 2026 wasn't just a bad week. It wasn't just a scandal. It was the kind of total, irreversible collapse that historians, media analysts, and cultural commentators will study for decades. Because this wasn't a story about one mistake. This was a story about what happens when an entire identity, an entire brand, an entire public persona built over years of meticulous curation meets the one thing it was never designed to survive. The truth. And the truth, as it turned out, had been hiding in plain sight for over a decade. Waiting, patient, inevitable. Let's go back to the beginning. Not the beginning of Meghan Markle's life, but the beginning of the end. February 10th, 2026. A date that will live in infamy for anyone who followed the Sussex saga. On that day, a series of photographs began circulating on Reddit and X, formerly known as Twitter. The images were grainy at first, low resolution, the kind of thing that might get dismissed as a deepfake or a conspiracy theory on any other day. But these photos were different. They showed a woman aboard a luxury yacht off the coast of the Italian Riviera. The setting was unmistakable. Champagne flutes catching the Mediterranean sun, designer swimwear draped over tan shoulders. The kind of casual opulence that only the truly powerful can afford, the kind that doesn't need to announce itself because everyone already knows. And surrounding this woman were men whose faces the world knew all too well. Prince Andrew, the Duke of York. Jeffrey Epstein, the convicted financier and sex offender whose name had become synonymous with the darkest corridors of elite power. A Russian property magnate reportedly under international sanctions. And at the center of it all, laughing, relaxed, reclining against Prince Andrew's shoulder with the ease of someone who belonged there, was a woman who looked remarkably, undeniably, like Meghan Markle. Now, in the age of artificial intelligence and digital manipulation, you might think the internet would have been skeptical. You might think people would have waited for official confirmation before drawing conclusions. But that's not what happened. What happened instead was something unprecedented in the history of online investigation. A global, crowdsourced forensic analysis that moved faster than any newsroom, any intelligence agency, any royal communications office could have anticipated or prepared for. Within hours, internet sleuths across multiple platforms had begun dissecting every pixel of those images with the kind of obsessive precision that would make professional forensic analysts envious. They matched a distinctive mole above the woman's right hip to known photographs of Meghan from her modeling portfolio and red carpet appearances. They identified the curve of a belly ring consistent with images from her early career days in Los Angeles. They traced her sunglasses to a specific discontinued Chanel design, a limited edition model that Meghan had been photographed wearing on at least 3 separate occasions between 2013 and 2015. They cross-referenced the background of the photos, the alignment of moored yachts at Porto Cervo in Sardinia, with satellite imagery and maritime records from the summer of 2014. They checked her known filming schedule for the television show Suits, confirming she had gaps in production during July and August of that year that aligned perfectly with the dates suggested by the metadata embedded in the image files. The evidence was overwhelming. Piece by piece, detail by detail, the crowdsourced investigation built a case that no reasonable person could dismiss. And by February 11th, a full cache of 7 high-resolution images had surfaced, showing Meghan aboard the same vessel over what appeared to be several consecutive days. Different outfits, different times of day, the same woman, the same yacht, the same company. The hashtag #YachtGirlMeghan exploded across social media, surpassing 80 million views within 48 hours and climbing to over 90 million shortly after. Reaction videos multiplied exponentially. Before and after clips compared Meghan's calm proclamations of self-reliance from past interviews with the newly surfaced evidence of elite access and privilege. The commentary shifted tone rapidly, moving from curiosity to suspicion to outright betrayal. The world was watching. The world was asking questions. And Meghan Markle, for the first time in her carefully managed public life, had no answers prepared. But the photos themselves were only part of the story. What made them truly explosive was the source. Two major outlets, the Daily Mail Online and the National Times, confirmed through internal sourcing that the yacht images had not come from paparazzi. They had not been obtained through hacking or surveillance or any of the usual tabloid methods that Meghan had spent years condemning. They had come from someone inside the Markle family itself. According to investigative journalist Andrea Beckett, the photos had been in family possession for years, stored away like a loaded weapon waiting for the right moment to be deployed. And that moment, apparently, had arrived with devastating precision. The images were reportedly sold to an American tabloid outlet in early February for approximately $85,000. Think about that for a moment. The betrayal wasn't just public, it was personal, it was familial. Someone in Meghan's own family had held onto these images, perhaps for years, perhaps waiting for exactly this kind of opportunity, and had chosen to release them at the precise moment they would cause maximum damage. The timing was surgical. 4 days before the premiere of The Climb Within, close enough to contaminate the launch, far enough ahead to let the story build momentum. It was, by any measure, a masterclass in strategic destruction. The revelation triggered a second wave of outrage, this time not just from critics, but from supporters who felt they had been deliberately misled. Not just by Meghan, but by the entire media ecosystem that had propped her up for years. Netflix sold us a hero, wrote one op-ed in The Atlantic. We got a strategist with a PR team and a blacked out chapter. That sentiment, that feeling of having been conned, would prove to be the most corrosive force of all. Because people can forgive mistakes. People can forgive poor judgment. People can even forgive hypocrisy if it comes with genuine contrition. But people do not forgive being made to feel foolish. And millions of people who had defended Meghan Markle, who had argued on her behalf in comment sections and family dinners and workplace debates, who had called her critics racist and her detractors jealous, who had bought her products and streamed her content and shared her quotes on Instagram, now felt exactly that. Foolish, used, manipulated, and there is no fury quite like the fury of a true believer who discovers they've been believing in a fiction. By February 12th, multiple major YouTube channels, including former supporters of Meghan's philanthropic causes, had posted videos retracting their praise and questioning the ethics of her entire media persona. A viral TikTok stitch comparing Meghan's Netflix quote, "I built everything on my own," with the yacht photos garnered 15.2 million views in under 20 hours. Fan forums once sympathetic to Meghan, including dedicated Reddit communities and various Facebook groups, began posting apologies, retractions, and even calls for boycotts. "She lied and we defended her," read one Reddit post with over 22,000 upvotes. "We were part of the con." The tide had turned completely. The defenders had become the accusers. The supporters had become the skeptics. And the silence from Meghan's camp only made it worse. But here's what made this moment truly catastrophic. It wasn't just the photos. Photos can be explained away. Context can be provided. Narratives can be reshaped by skilled communicators. What made this moment an extinction-level event for Meghan's brand was the timing. Because just 4 days after those images began circulating, on Valentine's Day, February 14th, 2026, Netflix was scheduled to release Meghan's latest project, a documentary special called The Climb Within. And this wasn't just any documentary. This was supposed to be her redemption arc, her comeback, her definitive statement to the world about who she really was beneath the headlines and the controversy and the palace intrigue. This was supposed to be the project that silenced every critic, vindicated every supporter, and relaunched Meghan Markle as the empowerment icon she had always claimed to be. The Climb Within had been in development for months. Co-produced by Archewell and Netflix for a reported $18 million, it was designed to be the ultimate expression of Meghan's personal brand. Every detail had been considered with the kind of obsessive precision that had become her signature. The setting was an ivory-tone studio space with soft lighting and minimalist floral decor, each element carefully chosen to project warmth, authenticity, and understated elegance. The kind of environment that whispers sincerity while being meticulously art-directed down to the last petal, down to the exact shade of cream on the walls, down to the precise angle of the afternoon light filtering through gauze curtains. Nothing was accidental. Everything was intentional. And that intentionality, that relentless curation, would ultimately become part of the problem. The interviewer was Sierra Langley, described as an opera-style journalist with a Harvard journalism pedigree. Someone sympathetic but credible. Someone who would ask the right questions in the right way to let Meghan tell her story exactly as she wanted it told. Someone who would hold space, as the wellness industry likes to say, without ever pushing too hard or venturing into territory that might disrupt the carefully constructed narrative. The format was intimate. Two women in conversation. No audience, no panel, no adversarial energy. Just warmth and understanding and the gentle unfolding of a story that had been rehearsed and refined until every beat landed exactly where it was supposed to. And the story Meghan wanted to tell was simple, powerful, and, as it turned out, deeply, fundamentally incomplete. She spoke about growing up in Woodland Hills, California, about her mother Doria working late shifts at jobs that never paid enough, about walking to school most mornings because there was no one available to drive her, about sitting in classrooms where she didn't quite fit in, where the color of her skin made her too much of one thing and not enough of another, about having no connections, no advantages, no shortcuts, no safety net. Everything the first have, she said, looking directly into the camera with the kind of practiced sincerity that had served her well for years, I built from scratch. There were no shortcuts. The narrative was clear and compelling. A young woman of color navigating poverty, discrimination, and professional rejection, rising through nothing but grit and determination and an unshakable belief in her own worth. Eventually marrying into one of the most elite institutions on earth, and then having the courage to walk away when that institution tried to silence her, diminish her, erase her. It was a story of triumph over adversity. A modern fairy tale with a feminist twist. The kind of story that sells books and fills auditoriums and inspires millions of women around the world to believe that they too can overcome anything. What she didn't mention was equally telling. And the omissions, once you knew what to look for, were enormous. She made no reference to the Toronto apartment she had shared with celebrity chef Corey Vidiello during a period when she was actively networking through Canada's elite social circles, attending exclusive events and cultivating relationships with influential figures who could advance her career. She said nothing about her years as a regular on the party circuit, a fixture at Soho House gatherings and private dinners, where the guest lists read like a who's who of entertainment, media, and old money. She made no mention of her lifestyle blog, The Tig, which had served as a carefully curated showcase of aspirational living, featuring designer brands, luxury travel, and the kind of experiences that hardly aligned with the narrative of humble origins and bootstrapped success. She didn't acknowledge the mentors, the collaborators, the relationships that had opened doors and created opportunities along the way. And most significantly, she made no reference to what investigative journalists had recently unearthed: a sealed marriage certificate filed in Bibb County, Georgia in 2011, a legal record now under formal review by a consortium of royal biographers and investigative reporters. Her story, as presented on The Climb Within, was meticulously edited, surgically curated, a lone woman with nothing but grit, no collaborators, no mentors, no relationships that might complicate the mythology, no chapters that might contradict the brand. It was a beautiful story, it was an inspiring story, and on any other day, it might have worked. But this wasn't any other day. Because as those words left Meghan's lips, as Netflix streamed them to millions of homes around the world, the yacht photos were streaming right alongside them on every social media platform in existence. Side by side, simultaneously. The woman who said she built everything from scratch, pictured laughing on a luxury yacht with some of the most powerful and controversial men in the world. The woman who claimed she never took shortcuts, photographed in the company of people who represented the very definition of elite access and privilege. The woman who positioned herself as a feminist icon of self-reliance and authentic empowerment, captured in images that suggested a very different kind of networking, a very different kind of climbing. The contradiction was so stark, so immediate, so visually undeniable that the internet didn't even need to articulate it. The memes wrote themselves. The reaction videos flooded every platform within minutes. One TikTok, viewed over 13 million times in its first day, simply opened with Meghan's quote from the documentary, "I didn't use anyone to get ahead," followed by a slow, deliberate zoom on the yacht photo. Meghan flanked by Prince Andrew and Jeffrey Epstein. No commentary needed. No explanation required. The image said everything that words could not. Another viral video compared Meghan's passionate rejection of British classism with screenshots of her attendance at exclusive Soho house parties and curated images from the TIG showing her draped in designer clothing and sipping champagne at private events. The caption read, "She didn't climb within. She climbed who she could. It was savage, it was relentless, and it was everywhere." And through all of this, through the mounting evidence and the viral mockery and the crumbling sponsorships, Meghan remained silent. She didn't tweet. She didn't release a statement. No Archewell spokesperson stepped forward. Not even a denial. Not even a carefully worded non-denial denial of the kind that PR professionals specialize in crafting. Nothing. This silence, which had once been Meghan's most effective strategy during scandal, the dignified refusal to engage with critics, the quiet confidence that let loyal supporters fill in the gaps with their own narratives of persecution and resilience, that silence now worked against her with devastating efficiency. Public patience had worn thin. The benefit of the doubt had been exhausted. And in the absence of any response, the narrative hardened into certainty. Even longtime PR consultant Justine Cartwright told the Financial Post, "Silence in a moment like this isn't neutral. It's either an admission or a complete breakdown of control. And in Meghan's case, it reads like both." And then things got worse. Much, much worse. Because what the public didn't know, what even Netflix's own executives apparently didn't fully anticipate, was what would happen when the interview went off script. Halfway through the episode, as Sierra Langley gently attempted to broach the subject of what she diplomatically called Meghan's unseen chapters, something changed. You could see it happen in real time, like watching a dam develop cracks before the flood. The carefully maintained composure fractured. The smile vanished as if someone had flipped a switch. The posture stiffened. The warmth in her eyes was replaced by something harder, something colder, something that looked a lot like cornered fury. The mask didn't just slip. It fell away entirely. And Meghan Markle, the woman who had spent years perfecting the art of controlled vulnerability, who had turned emotional authenticity into a brand strategy, who had made vulnerability itself a form of power, lost control entirely. "I've been blamed for everything," she snapped, her voice carrying an edge that Sierra Langley clearly hadn't expected. If the first had the same background as Catherine, the same whiteness, the same institutions, none of this would be questioned. "I didn't marry William, so suddenly I'm the villain." She lashed out at Catherine, the Princess of Wales, calling her the portrait of acceptability. Polished, protected, packaged. She compared their treatment by the press with a bitterness that went beyond frustration, beyond resentment, into something that sounded almost like envy distilled into pure, undiluted rage. She spoke about their positions within the royal hierarchy, their fundamental differences in how they were received by the British public. The way Catherine was celebrated for the same behaviors that Meghan was criticized for. And then she said something that sent shockwaves through every newsroom, every palace corridor, every living room watching around the world. She had the perfect family, the press adored her. She married the heir, I didn't, I had Andrew, and he gave me nothing. The implications of those words were staggering. Let me say that again so it really lands. I had Andrew, and he gave me nothing. While Meghan had never publicly confirmed the rumors that had swirled for years about a prior connection to Prince Andrew, this was the closest she had ever come to acknowledging one. And her words, heavy with bitterness and resentment, and the unmistakable tone of someone who felt cheated by a transaction that didn't deliver, left almost nothing to the imagination. She went further, calling Andrew a man without principles, claiming she had been promised doors that never opened, describing her time around the royal periphery before Harry as a calculated waste. She spoke about Andrew with the specific bitterness of someone who felt they had held up their end of an unspoken bargain only to be abandoned when the returns were due. The picture she was painting, perhaps without fully realizing it in the heat of the moment, perhaps beyond caring at that point, was one of strategic social climbing that had simply failed to deliver the expected returns. One investment that hadn't paid off before she moved on to the next. And then she turned her fire on Harry himself, the man she had married, the man who had given up his family, his country, his position, his military honors, his inheritance to be with her. The man who had stood beside her through every scandal, every controversy, every public battle, every tabloid headline. The man who had sat next to her on Oprah's couch and told the world that his family had questioned the color of their unborn child's skin. The man who had written a memoir called Spare that burned every bridge back to the only life he had ever known, that exposed private conversations with his father and brother, that detailed intimate family moments for the consumption of millions of strangers. The man who had chosen her over everything and everyone he had ever known. That man. She looked into the camera, and with a coldness that made even the sympathetic Sierra Langley visibly recoil, she said words that would become the most quoted, most analyzed, most devastating statement of the entire Sussex saga. He isn't William. I thought I could build something with Harry. Build power, not just stories, but he follows. He hesitates. He waits to be told. William never waits. And then the final blow, delivered with a clarity that was almost surgical in its cruelty. A single sentence that would echo through tabloids and talk shows and palace corridors for months, perhaps years, to come. Harry was my gamble, but the first bet on the wrong brother. Let that sink in for a moment. Really let it settle. In a single sentence, broadcast to millions of people around the world, she reduced her marriage, her family, her children, her entire life with Prince Harry to a strategic miscalculation. Not a love story gone wrong. Not a partnership that faced impossible pressures from a hostile institution and a predatory press. Not even a relationship that simply ran its course. A gamble, a bet, a calculated wager on a man's utility, his position, his proximity to power. One that she lost. Every sacrifice Harry had made, every relationship he had severed, every tradition he had abandoned, every Christmas he had missed, every funeral he had attended as an outsider. Every phone call from his father that went unanswered, every olive branch from his brother that was rejected, all of it reframed in an instant as the collateral damage of a wager that didn't pay off. Not a tragedy of love, a failure of strategy. Netflix cut the segment almost immediately. They pulled it from future airings. They scrubbed it from their post-production library and initiated what they internally called contract lockdown protocol. But it was too late. Far too late. A production assistant, perhaps motivated by conscience, perhaps by money, perhaps by the simple human impulse to share something extraordinary, had already leaked the footage. Within hours, it was everywhere. Absolutely everywhere. Every news outlet from London to Los Angeles, from Sydney to Sao Paulo, was running the same headlines. Bet on the wrong brother. Meghan unloads on Harry. Duchess of destruction. Archetypes shattered in 7 minutes. I had Andrew, and he gave me nothing. The quotes were inescapable. They dominated every news cycle, every social media feed, every conversation in every office and living room and coffee shop around the world. The palace refused comment. Netflix refused comment. Harry, notably absent from all promotional content for the climb within, was nowhere to be seen, not at a public event, not on social media, not even through a spokesperson. Just gone, vanished into the same silence that was consuming his wife, but for very different reasons. Inside Archewell's Santa Barbara headquarters, The atmosphere was described by insiders as apocalyptic. Emergency calls were made to legal teams, PR firms, crisis management consultants, and mental health advisors. Several employees reportedly requested to be reassigned or submitted their resignations altogether, citing what they described as irreconcilable ethical conflicts. These weren't junior staffers or temporary contractors. These were people who had believed in the mission, who had taken jobs at Archewell because they genuinely thought they were going to change the world, who had defended Meghan in private conversations and public forums, and who now felt that the foundation of everything they had been working toward was built on sand. The organization that was supposed to be changing the world through compassion and community couldn't even maintain the loyalty of its own team. The fallout was immediate and catastrophic on every measurable front. Within 48 hours of the documentary's release, global viewership had dropped by over 60%. Netflix confirmed that over 2.4 million subscribers canceled their accounts between February 14th and February 16th, citing breach of trust, factual misrepresentation, and deceptive branding as their reasons. The company's stock price fell by 4.7% on February 15th alone, wiping out nearly $3.8 billion in market value in under 24 hours. The special's own Rotten Tomatoes audience score plummeted to 19% by early afternoon on Valentine's Day, making it one of the worst-reviewed specials in Netflix's history. For the first time since its founding, the streaming giant publicly acknowledged what it called a brand integrity error tied to a royal figure. Those words, brand integrity error, were corporate speak for something much simpler and much more damning. We made a terrible mistake, and it cost us billions. The economic shockwaves rippled outward with merciless speed and precision. Netflix's pre-launch media spend on the climb within had totaled over $6 million, with additional promotional partnerships involving L'Oreal, H&M Conscious, and Whoop Wellness. By February 13th, before the documentary had even officially aired, all three corporate partners had suspended marketing activity. Internal estimates obtained by media analysts showed the project was expected to recoup at least $12 million in branded placement, streaming licenses, and global promotion. Post-scandal, those projections collapsed to under $2.1 million in actual return on investment. The total confirmed loss reached $16.2 million. An expensive mistake, as one anonymous Netflix executive would later describe it, with the kind of understatement that only someone facing a board of directors can truly appreciate. Meghan's contract was quietly terminated on February 17th. No renewal, no second feature, no formal farewell, no press release, no thank you for the partnership, just silence. The kind of silence that corporations deploy when they want to pretend something never happened. But the damage extended far beyond Netflix, far beyond streaming numbers and stock prices and subscriber counts. The collapse radiated outward through every layer of Meghan's carefully constructed empire, like cracks spreading through glass. Corporate sponsors fled with the kind of speed that suggested they had been looking for an exit for some time and had finally been given permission to take it. A skincare brand that had been planning a tie-in campaign with Archewell Wellness suspended its contract by sundown on the 14th. Whole Foods Market issued an internal directive to regional buyers postponing the rollout of the Sussex blend herbal tea line, part of Meghan's lifestyle venture Evermark. One distributor's leaked email captured the mood with brutal honesty. "This isn't a wellness brand anymore," it read. "It's a liability." Meghan's Evermark trademark filing, submitted just weeks earlier on January 29th, faced its first formal opposition on February 16th from a UK-based legal consortium tied to the Sussex Royal Foundation. The claim cited conflict of brand interest, unethical leveraging of former royal titles, and public confusion. The brand that was supposed to represent Meghan's post-royal independence was now being challenged by the very institution she had left behind. Hollywood followed suit with the kind of brutal efficiency that the entertainment industry reserves for people who are no longer useful. Two ongoing negotiations between Archewell Productions and major streaming platforms were placed on indefinite hold. A romantic drama series that had been optioned by Hulu, a project Meghan had reportedly been personally passionate about, was shelved without explanation. A documentary anthology on female entrepreneurs, previously greenlit by Apple TV+, with Meghan attached as executive producer, was quietly moved into what the industry calls development limbo, a polite way of saying it would never see the light of day. Both companies confirmed that due diligence reviews had been reopened in light of what they carefully termed recent public disclosures affecting character credibility. Within the same news cycle, a third blow struck. Endeavor Talent Agency, long rumored to be considering Meghan for its prestigious global speakers roster, announced through a spokesperson that it was no longer in exploratory discussions with the Duchess of Sussex. Hollywood, in short, had begun pulling the plug. Not with anger, not with drama, but with the cold, clinical efficiency of an industry that runs on perception and had just watched one of its most prominent figures become toxic overnight. And through it all, the palace watched, quietly at first, then not so quietly, and then the palace acted. On the evening of February 13, 2026, King Charles III broke his silence. Not through a press secretary, not through a carefully worded statement released to approved correspondence through the usual channels. Through direct royal action. A confidential intelligence briefing had been delivered to the king earlier that day at 16:45 Greenwich Mean Time. The dossier, compiled by the Royal Communications Office and reviewed by legal counsel, was comprehensive and damning. It included the now confirmed provenance of the yacht photos and the chain of custody that authenticated them. It included the sealed 2011 Georgia marriage record that Meghan had never publicly acknowledged. It included a detailed timeline discrepancy between her claims on the climb within and publicly accessible legal filings. And most damning of all, it included a leaked email from Netflix's own legal department to the palace dated February 12th, confirming that Meghan's production team had been warned internally about the existence of the photos before the show aired. They knew, they were told, and they proceeded anyway. They let Meghan sit in front of a camera, look into a lens that would broadcast her words to millions of people, and say with absolute conviction, "I've never taken shortcuts. I've never used anyone to get ahead." That single line, now immortalized in contradiction, triggered what one senior palace aide described as a breach of sovereign trust. Not a personal slight, not a family disagreement, an institutional crisis. At precisely 19:30 Greenwich Mean Time, King Charles initiated a direct video call to Montecito. No media advisors present, no protocol barriers, no intermediaries. Just a private and firm conversation placed from the Royal Library at Windsor Castle, a room steeped in centuries of history and tradition, to a mansion in California that suddenly felt very far from everything it had once been connected to. Multiple sources later confirmed the exchange lasted just under 7 minutes. 7 minutes. That's all it took. Charles's words, though polite in the manner that only British royalty can manage when delivering devastating news, were unambiguous. If what the press now holds is factual, you will be erased from the royal record. This is no longer personal. This is institutional. The king reportedly demanded clarification on 3 specific points. The sealed marriage in Georgia. The past affiliations with the Epstein circle as evidenced by the yacht photos, and the veracity of the statements Meghan had made in the Netflix special. Meghan's response, described by insiders as stammering and evasive, failed to provide a clear denial or credible defense on any of the 3 points. She reportedly attempted to redirect the conversation toward media persecution and racial bias, strategies that had served her well in past controversies. But Charles, according to those briefed on the call, was unmoved. "This isn't about the press," he reportedly said. "This is about the record." And erased she was. Within hours, palace action commenced with a swiftness and thoroughness that stunned even veteran royal watchers. Meghan's profile and official images were removed from the royal family website, replaced by a static text reading simply, "No longer associated with official duties." A silent freeze was placed on all archival footage involving Meghan from 2018 to 2020 in the Royal Digital Repository. Royal correspondents were quietly informed through back channels that the Duchess's tenure was now viewed as historically void. It wasn't just symbolic erasure, it was narrative nullification. The monarchy's way of saying not just that Meghan was no longer welcome, not just that she had fallen from grace, but that she had never truly belonged in the first place. That her chapter in the royal story was being not just closed, but redacted. On February 18th, The Telegraph published an exclusive report revealing that King Charles's private legal team had sent a formal inquiry regarding Meghan's UK immigration and title status, should she attempt to return to Britain. While this was not a formal revocation of visa rights, the message was unmistakable. The royal household, which had maintained a posture of dignified silence since Harry and Meghan's exit in 2020, had now moved decisively from indifference to active distancing. The door wasn't just closed, it was being sealed, bricked over, plastered smooth, as if there had never been a door there at all. The Archewell Foundation, once touted as a 21st century engine of social transformation, crumbled in parallel. Over the course of 72 hours, 2 brand partners terminated their agreements. One board member resigned quietly, offering no public explanation. A $5 million pledge from a prominent Silicon Valley donor was withdrawn pending what the donor's office described as clarification of public trust concerns. The foundation that was supposed to be Meghan and Harry's legacy, their proof that leaving the royal family had been worth it, their answer to every critic who said they were nothing without the crown, was falling apart from the inside out. And Harry, what about Harry in all of this? The man who had given up everything, his family, his country, his military honors, his place in the line of succession, his relationship with his brother William, once his closest friend and ally, his relationship with his father Charles, complicated but real, his connection to his grandmother, the late Queen Elizabeth, who had loved him deeply and whom he had honored in his own imperfect way. All of it sacrificed on the altar of a love story that Meghan herself had just publicly, brutally, irreversibly reduced to a failed bet. Sources described Harry as visibly broken, not angry, not defiant, not strategizing his next move. Broken. A longtime friend reportedly told the Evening Report he's realizing the family he sacrificed everything for may never truly be his again. And the woman he sacrificed it for may never have been who he thought she was. That quote, perhaps more than any other detail in this entire saga, captures the true human cost of what happened. Because behind the headlines and the hashtags and the stock prices and the subscriber counts, there was a man. A father of 2, a son, a brother. A man who had believed in something with his whole heart and was now watching it disintegrate in front of the entire world. Harry was absent from all promotional content for The Climb Within. He missed a scheduled virtual appearance for a children's charity on February 15th. His spokesperson offered no explanation. Palace insiders hinted that the Duke was deeply shaken and privately conflicted, torn between the loyalty he still felt toward his wife and the growing realization that the narrative he had been living inside might not be the one he thought it was. Inside the Montecito estate, sources described a household on lockdown. No movement, no visitors, no comments, just a towering silence hanging over a house that had once called itself a beacon of light. Behind the scenes, Meghan's isolation deepened with each passing hour. 2 Archewell employees, speaking on condition of anonymity, told reporters that Meghan had lost the room. Once hailed internally as an ambitious, visionary figure, a leader who inspired loyalty and demanded excellence, she was now described as reactive, paranoid, and emotionally combustible. Key staff members were instructed to halt all public-facing initiatives until further notice. The woman who had built her brand on connection, on community, on the power of shared stories, was now utterly alone. By evening on February 16th, even Meghan's former defenders in the media had grown silent. Notable columnists who had previously championed her as a feminist icon, writers who had built their own platforms partly on the strength of their support for the Duchess, published columns of quiet withdrawal. One headline captured the mood with devastating simplicity. We believed, and now we reconsider. Online communities reflected the shift with equal finality. Pro-Sussex Reddit pages were closed or locked by their own moderators. Facebook fan groups collapsed under internal disputes as members turned on each other, arguing about who had been naive and who had been complicit. Petitions surfaced demanding that Spotify and Netflix release full internal memos related to Meghan's projects. The support network that had once shielded Meghan from criticism, that had attacked her detractors and amplified her message and defended her honor in countless online battles, had simply evaporated. Gone, as if it had never existed. And in that silence, the internet found its final verdict. The memes no longer trended. The hashtags faded from the top of the charts. The anger cooled into something worse than hatred, worse than mockery, worse than outrage. Indifference. Meghan wasn't being attacked anymore. She was being forgotten, absorbed into the cultural graveyard of once powerful brands that overreached, overstated, and ultimately collapsed under the weight of their own contradictions. Filed away alongside other cautionary tales of hubris and image management gone wrong. Remembered not for what she achieved, but for how spectacularly she fell. A royal commentator on Sky News perhaps said it best on the evening of February 18th, in a segment that would be replayed thousands of times in the days that followed. Meghan wanted to be Diana and Oprah in one body. Royal and revolutionary, vulnerable and untouchable, revered and feared. But the problem with building an empire on image is this: when that image breaks, there's nothing underneath. And that, ultimately, is the lesson of this extraordinary, tragic, almost Shakespearean collapse. Not a lesson about royalty or celebrity or even media manipulation, though it contains all of those things. It's a lesson about the fundamental fragility of any life built on curation rather than truth. About what happens when the gap between the story you tell and the life you actually lived becomes so wide that no amount of soft lighting and minimalist floral decor can bridge it anymore. Meghan Markle spent years climbing over scrutiny, climbing over rejection, climbing over palace walls and press hostility and public skepticism. She climbed with determination and intelligence and a relentless, almost superhuman ability to reshape every setback into a narrative of perseverance. She built a brand on the idea of escape. Escape from the palace, escape from the press, escape from the expectations of a centuries-old institution that she said tried to silence her. Escape from a country she said rejected her. Escape from a family she said failed to protect her. Escape, always escape, moving forward, never looking back, never acknowledging what was left behind or what had been stepped over along the way. But you cannot escape your past forever. That is the one immutable law of public life, and perhaps of life itself. You can curate it. You can edit it. You can present a version of it that serves your narrative and supports your brand and makes you look like exactly the person you want the world to see. You can hire the best PR teams and the most sympathetic interviewers and the most expensive production companies to help you tell your story in exactly the way you want it told. You can sit in an ivory-tone studio with soft lighting and look into a camera and say with absolute conviction that you built everything from scratch, that you never took shortcuts, that you never used anyone to get ahead. And for a while, maybe even for years, people will believe you. They will defend you. They will buy your products and stream your content and share your quotes and attack anyone who dares to question your story. But the truth has a way of surfacing. It always does. Sometimes it takes months. Sometimes it takes years. Sometimes it takes over a decade. But it always comes out. It comes out in grainy photographs from a yacht in the Mediterranean. It comes out in sealed marriage certificates from small-town courthouses. It comes out in the bitter, unscripted words of a woman who has spent so long performing a version of herself that she no longer knows where the performance ends and the person begins. It comes out in the 7-minute phone call from a king who has finally had enough. It comes out in the silence of a husband who is beginning to understand that the life he destroyed his family for was built on a foundation he never got to inspect. And when it came out for Meghan Markle, it didn't arrive as a whisper. It arrived as a flood. A tidal wave of photographs and contradictions, and leaked footage and royal decrees, and corporate terminations, and subscriber cancellations, and viral memes, and quiet retractions from former allies that swept away everything she had built in a matter of days. 6 days, that's all it took. 6 days to go from global inspiration to cautionary tale. From the woman who symbolized reinvention to the woman whose silence became a metaphor for collapse. From a brand worth millions to a liability that no corporation, no platform, no institution wanted anywhere near its name. In just 6 days, the climb within became the fall without. The empowerment icon became a case study in the dangers of mythmaking. The woman who once commanded the attention of the entire world found herself in the one position she had never prepared for, the one scenario her PR team had never wargamed, the one outcome her carefully constructed narrative had never accounted for. Not controversy, not criticism, not even hatred, something far worse, irrelevance. The Duchess had disappeared, not behind palace walls this time, not into the protective embrace of a sympathetic media ecosystem, not into the carefully managed silence of a strategic retreat, but into the void of her own design. Into the gap between the story she told and the life she actually lived. Into the space where authenticity was supposed to be but never quite was. Into the wreckage of relationships she had used and discarded, of institutions she had leveraged and abandoned, of people she had charmed and then blamed when the charm stopped working. Back in Montecito, the house sat quiet. The children played in rooms their mother had decorated with the same meticulous attention to detail she brought to everything. Every pillow placed just so, every photograph angled for maximum warmth, every surface curated to project the image of a life well lived. Outside, the California sun continued to shine with its usual indifference, illuminating a property that had once been described in magazine profiles as a sanctuary, a haven, a place where two people who had defied the world could finally be themselves. Now it was just a house. A very expensive, very quiet house where a woman sat alone with the consequences of her own mythology, and a man sat somewhere else in that same house, perhaps in a different room, perhaps staring at a phone that no longer rang with calls from the family he had left behind, wondering how it had all gone so wrong so fast. And so the arc ends, not in vindication, not in rebirth, not in the triumphant final act that Meghan had so carefully scripted for herself, the one where she emerged from every trial stronger and more radiant than before, the one where the critics were silenced and the doubters were shamed, and the world finally recognized her for the extraordinary woman she had always told them she was. Not that ending, a different one, a quieter one that no amount of soft lighting or sympathetic interviewers or $18 million production budgets could have prevented. It ends in the quiet ash of a brand once fueled by the power of narrative and undone by the one thing it never truly embraced: the truth.
If this story moved you, leave a like and subscribe. Share it with someone who needs to know. The truth continues tomorrow. Until then, this was your daily dose